Carlson. I am a professor in the Department of Oncology here at the University of Calgary and a clinical psychologist at the Arthur Child Cancer Center. And I'm very, very pleased to be able to welcome you all to the Koopmans Lecture for 2026. I'm going to do a little bit of introductory remarks here, and then we'll turn it over to David Spence, who will also make a few remarks and tell us a bit of his story, and then we'll turn to David Victorson as our keynote speaker. So first, I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. I acknowledge that I live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. I acknowledge that many Indigenous peoples in Canada, whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations and have been stewards of the land. I'm grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before. I recognize the land as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we reside on or are visiting. Now, the Koopmans Lecture Series itself was established to honor the memory of the late Catherine Poricos Koopmans, established by her widower, Henry Koopmans, and the family. Catherine sadly died at a very young age from breast cancer, and her area of research was nutrition and eating disorders. So the funds support distinguished visiting speakers alternating between psychosocial oncology, which is our topic today, and obesity or nutrition research. And that's a photo of Henry Koopmans, who has since also passed away. And today in the audience we have his widow, his second wife, I guess we'd say Jan Koopmans, who is here with us if you want to give a wave. Yes, it's great to have Jan here. Okay. And Jan also has a personal connection to psychosocial oncology, being the first social worker in Calgary to work in the area of psychosocial oncology beginning in the early 1980s. And she's been retired for some time now. So it's a great honor to have Jan here representing the family. And so the objective of the lectureship is to inform scientific exchanges between the scholar, the public, as well as graduate students and trainees, and he's been doing that all day. So we're very pleased to have him. Now, before we launch into the next speaker, I want to give you some background around the Action Center, which stands for the Alberta Complementary Therapy and Integrative Oncology Center that I am a director of. You can find out about the Action Center at our website, action-center.ca. And the mission of the Action Center is to promote and facilitate evidence-based integrative oncology care. I'll tell you what that is in a moment. Throughout Alberta and beyond, through patient and healthcare provider education, clinical service, research, and training. So integrative oncology is defined as a patient-centered, evidence-informed field of cancer care that utilizes mind and body practices, so things like meditation, yoga, etc., natural health products, and lifestyle modification from different traditions alongside conventional cancer treatments. So we include nature therapy among these sort of complementary approaches. And just to point out to you that on the Action Center website, there is a whole tab with many, many resources that are free for people to access. So guides and toolkits that summarize the evidence in the area around nutrition, exercise. We have videos for Tai Chi and Qigong and mindfulness and yoga. They're all freely accessible for anyone to use there on the website. So I would really encourage you to go to the website, have a poke around, and check out those resources. Again, there's the address. And I also want to point out a specific study we're doing called the Nature Core study, or it's a whole program of research that Jamie Peterson, my PhD student, is working on with her patient partner, David Spence, who's also one of our speakers. And the first part of this program of research is a survey that anyone who has been living with cancer or is a family member or a clinician in that area can fill out, and we'll pass around more information about that at the end of the talk. I also just learned today, Dr. Victorson did grand rounds at the Cancer Center, that there are local resources that will connect people with nature experiences that I was not even familiar with. So in K-Country, there's the William Watson Lodge, which is just down Highway 40. It looks like this. It's fully accessible. and it's actually free for people who qualify as having a disability. This website describes the lodge and the facilities, but there's a main lodge, there's also cabins that you can rent. They're beautiful, they have these gorgeous views, and they're entirely accessible, and even have things like lifts for the beds. It's really impressive. This last picture is one of the cabins. So anybody who meets these eligibility criteria is able to apply for a free visit to the William Watson Lodge, which is absolutely amazing. So if you know anybody in that category, maybe encourage them to take advantage of that. The other thing we talked about this morning is the Parks Prescription Program that's run by Parks Canada. This is amazing as well. So any healthcare provider can apply online to be a prescriber of nature of parks. And I just did it today because I didn't know about it, and they just ask what profession and to prove your professional designation. Then they approve you, and I can literally write a prescription. I'll get a pad, and I can write Parks Prescription, and that can be used by anybody I give it to, and each provider is allowed to use one per month, and you get a free Parks Pass for all of the national parks in Canada, which is amazing. So take advantage of that, check out their website. I also learned after the session this morning about a grief walking group in Calgary that's run by Sonia Jacobek. Are you here, Sonia? Where are you? There you are. Excellent. So yeah, I learned about this from Jess Simon, one of our palliative care physicians. So it's called Good Grief, and it sounds like you go 4 times a year and do these grief walking programs. Yes. Yeah. So if you want to learn more about that, go to Sonia afterwards during our reception. And I also learned about this dementia-inclusive park that is being built. I don't think it's open yet.
No, this fall.
This fall. And I won't play the video, it's quite long, but it looks amazing. Like, it's accessible, it has all these sensory features, it's got like walking lanes that are color-coded, and birds, and I mean, it looks just amazing. So I think it's gonna be in Forest Lawn, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, so it'll be in the southeast part of the city. It looks fantastic, so check that out. It's the first of its kind in all of Canada, which is also amazing and fantastic for Calgary to be doing that. The last thing I want to point you to is a film that I have helped to produce along with Dr. Mike Lang, who's a faculty member in nursing, and he's a digital storyteller and a filmmaker. It's about caregivers going into wild natural environments and how learning mindfulness and meditation in those environments can help support their caregiving. In this particular film, it's about young caregivers. And that's where you can find it. I might play the trailer. It's very brief. I just have to switch windows here. Let's see if I can find it. There it is. I'm going to play this.
Never really talked about my experience as a caregiver. I would always look at other people and just wonder, how are they so happy? Like, how are you guys enjoying life right now?
Mindfulness is not about making everything happy and positive, right? It's about engaging in your life, the good, the bad, and the ugly. With mindfulness, we can more mindfully choose how we want to deal with a stressful situation.
There's caregiving throughout all stages of life, but I think there's only one stage where you're not expected to be a caregiver, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it so difficult to be a young caregiver.
Someone viewing won't see what I've been through, but I can promise them that I've wanted to give up in the most worst ways, but I didn't. And it's been worth it because it got way better.
All right, so that's an introduction to the film Like a Mountain. Let me go back to the slides here. And you can learn more about that on the website that's listed here, or just look up Like a Mountain film. And that we had our first screening of that last week at a Young Caregivers Conference in Ontario. It was really well received and powerful, so that was great to really highlight the power of natural environments for people going through a difficult time. All right, so now I'm going to introduce our next speaker, David Spence. So he's now retired after 42 years broadcasting career. Does anybody remember David from the, yes. The weather on CTV. So David is now 100% focused on patient engagement in cancer care and research. In 2012, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer and was treated with radiation in 2013. The treatment was successful and the cancer has so far not returned. In In 2018, David began his patient engagement journey by signing on as a patient and family advisor with Alberta Health Services, and that's led to his work on dozens of focus groups and committees, now with Cancer Care Alberta and Primary Care Alberta. So David is also a patient partner with the Action Centre that I introduced you to just a moment ago, and is working on the project for the very reason we're here tonight. So he's a patient partner with Jamie's project investigating nature-based interventions in cancer therapy. So help me welcome David up to the podium.
That's me. That's me, age 6. And that is my first fish. It's a Manitoba pickerel. In 1966, I was a cute kid. In 2012, I was a sick man. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. What could these two things possibly have to do with each other? Maybe a lot more than you think, and probably not in the way you are thinking. Good evening. It is an honor to be here tonight and to introduce today's featured speaker, Dr. David Victorson from Northwestern University in Chicago. His work explores how nature, mindfulness, and well-being can support people living through cancer and other chronic illnesses, and that work intersects with my own life in ways I didn't expect to be speaking about tonight. Let me say this at the outset, and Linda's already said it. I'm not a clinician, I'm not a physician, I'm a patient partner working alongside Jamie Peterson in Dr. Carlson's lab here at the University of Calgary on a study exploring nature-based interventions in cancer therapy. That role has given me a window into the science behind something I had only understood through lived experience. I want to share something personal, family story. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2012 and treated in 2013. A diagnosis like that does not arrive quietly. It interrupts everything. It reframes your past, and it compresses your future. But in some ways, my story didn't begin there. It began long before in a family where cancer was not an exception. It was part of the landscape. I grew up in a family of 4, my parents, my sister, and me. My father was a fisherman at heart, patient, quiet at the water's edge, happiest when he had a line in and nowhere else to be. He preferred to fish from shore, not from a boat, closer to nature. He was diagnosed with colorectal cancer. My mother was the one who knew where the blueberries grew. She could find them in any forest. She was diagnosed with leukemia. My sister is the most outdoorsy of all of us, spends every moment that she can with her husband hiking and camping, kayaking, biking. She was diagnosed with endometrial cancer, and then years later, me. They say half of us will get cancer. Well, in our family, 4 people, 1 family, 4 diagnoses. And yet, if you had met us before any of that happened, you would have not seen this illness coming. You would have seen a happy, healthy family rooted in the outdoors. We camped, we fished for years and years. We hiked through woods that felt endless when we were children. In the fall, we picked blueberries until our fingers were stained and our pails were full. And one place holds a kind of quiet permanence in my memory. This is in Manitoba, Toniata Beach at Falcon Lake. It wasn't just a destination, it was a rhythm. It was my childhood. For years, every summer was spent there. A place where time slowed, where you could hear loons across the water at night and feel the day expand instead of contract. That is where I learned what it meant to belong to something larger than yourself. All 4 of us loved that world. And all 4 of us, in time, got cancer. That sentence is kind of hard to say out loud, actually, because it invites a question with no simple answer. Did nature matter? Maybe not in the simplistic sense. Nature does not prevent cancer. Biology is more complicated than that. Genetics, environment, chance all play a role. But the question I've lived with is different. Did nature help us survive what cancer did to us? Did it help us endure treatment, uncertainty, fear, anxiety, and in my mother's case, a terminal diagnosis? My mother lived far longer than her prognosis suggested, not just in time, but in presence. There were years in which she defied the timeline written for her. She stayed connected to people. She stayed connected to meaning and to the natural world that she had always loved. She passed in December of 2014, just 2 weeks before her birthday, her 98th birthday. My father's story does not resolve the same way. His colorectal cancer did not end in recovery. Surgery left him in a state that was not sustainable, and we lost him. I've sat with that for a long time. Not looking for blame or causation, but wondering, as you do, why some people recover and others do not, even within the same family, the same values, the same love of life. There are no clean answers there, only humility and grief that doesn't fully leave. But here's what I can say with confidence. In every one of our stories, nature was present. It slowed the internal noise, it widened perspective, it made suffering feel held rather than isolated. When I think back to that footage you just saw, I don't just remember a place. I remember a feeling that life was still open, that the horizon was still there, that even if something difficult came later, and it did, it had not yet closed in on us at that time. We each carried that forward into our own cancer journeys, not as protection, but as grounding. That lived experience is part of what brought me to Dr. Carlson's lab and to Jamie Peterson's research into nature-based interventions in cancer therapy. As a patient partner, I sit at the intersection of two things that have defined my life: a family shaped by cancer and a family shaped by nature. Being part of research that takes that intersection seriously means a great deal to me. Thank you, Jamie, and thank you, Linda, for allowing me to take part. It's exactly why this evening's lecture matters, not just to me personally, but to the work happening here at the University of Calgary. Dr. David Victorson's research at Northwestern gives language and structure to something many of us have felt intuitively for a long time. That time in nature changes something in us, that it improves quality of life, it reduces stress, it supports emotional regulation and helps people reconnect with meaning when illness has disrupted everything. Not as an alternative to medical treatment, but as a companion to it. What I find compelling is that the research honors both the science and the experience. It takes seriously what patients have always known, that healing is not always the same as curing. Curing is biological, healing is human. We often think of cancer care as something that happens in hospitals, clinics, and laboratories, and it does. But some of it also happens in forests, on lake shores, on quiet walks, where breath slows down and attention expands. Looking back, I don't think that little boy holding his first fish had any idea what life would bring. He didn't know cancer would touch every member of his family, but he already knew something important. He knew that being outdoors made him feel connected, grounded, and alive. And decades later, I continue to live that lesson. I want to tell you something. Last night, a few of us went out for dinner. There were 8 of us at the table. And by sheer coincidence, 7 of us had Manitoba pickerel. And it was good. It was really good. So I turned to Dr. Victorson and I said, I'm introducing you tomorrow night. How do you want me to do that? And he said to me, just introduce me as the other David. But I can't do that. I don't think that would do you justice, because you have a pretty impressive resume. Here we go. David Victorson is a licensed psychologist, professor of medical social sciences, and director of the Flourishing in Society and Health Research Lab at the Feinberg School of Medicine at Northwestern University in Chicago. He's director of research at the Oster Center for Integrative Health at Northwestern University and director of integrative oncology research at the Cancer Survivorship Institute at the Robert H. Lurie Comprehensive Cancer Center. Since 2008, he's co-founded and has served as volunteer executive director of a national nonprofit organization called True North Treks that supports teens, young adults, and caregivers affected by cancer to find direction through connection. His research program focuses on the role of mindfulness-based emotion regulation, deep social connection, nature contact, and planetary reciprocity, and positive health behavior engagement in promoting health, well-being, and flourishing in people, our population, and the planet. It's quite a resume. Congratulations. Dr. David Victorson.
That was beautiful, and thank you so much for sharing your story. It was very touching and meaningful, I think, to many of us. I'm just going to get these slides going. And I'll turn it over to the other David.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you to Jan. And David, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm lucky and honored to get to follow that. We had so many connections in what you shared. Hi everyone, it's nice to be here, coming from the Chicago area in the US. And what a beautiful day today was. I arrived yesterday and I was not sure about the weather here, but I was hoping David could give me a little bit of a recap. But it turned out to be a gorgeous sunny day today. It was really nice. So, like Linda's land acknowledgement, I too, before I give talks on nature connection, I also like to do an acknowledgement of sorts. That in most indigenous cultures, before taking anything from the land or water, putting down some tobacco as an offering is a sign of respect and the reciprocal relationship that we have with Mother Earth. Provides an opportunity to thank the land, plants, and animals, and to thank the Creator, to be humble and intentional. It's everyone's birthright to have access to live amongst the trees and rivers and deserts, lakes and prairies, mountains and oceans. And when we make reference to these things and how good they can be for our health, to take the knowledge and wisdom that they give, it's also important to put some tobacco down, to honor and acknowledge Mother Earth and the first peoples who were here before us, who made community in this nature, who lived and loved and fought and died here, amongst the trees and rivers and deserts and lakes and prairies and mountains and oceans, and who knew long before our modern science how powerful and healer nature is. Let us not forget to also celebrate and revere the first scientists and discoverers who showed us this way. So, in my nature talks, I also like to begin just with a word from my sponsor.
Do you find yourself longing for the apocalypse? I did. I was looking for a reason to live. Hi, are you feeling tired, irritable, stressed out? Well, you might consider nature.
From the people that brought you getting outside comes prescription strength nature, a non-harmful medication shown to relieve the crippling symptoms of modern life.
Nature's recommended for humans of all ages, and it's great for pets too.
Nature can reduce cynicism, meaninglessness, anal retentiveness. In clinical studies, nature is proven to decrease work-induced catatonia.
Caution, nature may cause you to slow down, quit your job, or seriously consider what the you're doing with your life.
If you are overly cynical, jaded, or emotionally numb, you may need to increase your dose of nature. Do you have trouble being even mildly uncomfortable? Nature may not be right for you. Side effects may include spontaneous euphoria, taking yourself less seriously, and being in a good mood for no apparent reason.
So ask your doctor if nature is right for you.
All right, yeah, it's worth applauding. That's a great video. So I have nothing to disclose except that I'm very grateful to be here and that I'm very curious about how spending safe and meaningful time in nature can benefit the well-being of people and the planet. As was described in my long-winded introduction of the different things that I study, nature, contact, and planetary health is a through line through a lot of the different research projects that we do. And we've published some different papers that look at how we define and contextualize what nature actually is and what it isn't, how being in nature can be beneficial to us biologically as well as psychologically, and also how we can start to view our time in nature as a gateway toward returning the favor back to Mother Earth as well, and helping to enact different behaviors that are planetary health friendly. I'm wondering, is that door closed?
I closed it.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right. It's all right.
Talk loud.
I'll try and talk loud. So just to start us off with a question, what is it about being in nature that can be so healing and restorative and transformational? And do you have a personal connection or story that's about nature and how it may have helped you or someone else in some way? The more talks I give about this, the more I feel like just about everyone has some connection point to nature being there for them. I come from a long line of nemophilists, dendrophiles, thalassophiles, and orophiles. You can Google those if you don't know what those mean. Basically, like a lover of the woods and the water and the mountains. My great-grandfather immigrated from Sweden to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where he was a sawyer and spent most of his life in the woods cutting down trees, probably for Chicago. My grandfather, before he could speak English, would spend his days riding his horse Rex, herding cattle in the area. My own father exposed my brothers and I to nature at a very young age, where I probably have spent the same amount of time in the woods and on the water as I have not. We are a big fishing family growing up on Lake Michigan, and we would go fishing no matter how cold and nasty it can be. There's a Norwegian word called friluftsliv, and that stands for free air life. It's a Nordic philosophy that a lot of the Scandinavian countries embody, and it basically bows to nature, saying that spending quality time in the outside is good for the soul, and it helps develop grit and just a really peaceful relationship with the world. Recently, there's been some TikTok posts about a practice in Scandinavian countries where they will take babies in their strollers, wrapped up in blankets, where they get left outside of coffee houses while the parents are inside, solely for them to take in the nice winter air. In our family, we had a philosophy we abided by that's also a Nordic one, which is there's no bad weather, just bad gear. And I think that's Canadian too. Well, there's a lot of countries that claim that, but that's good. No, my story with nature does trace back to someone. This is a mother named Delilah, who in the 50s was raising her 4 rambunctious boys. And her oldest son, Dale, was in the military stationed in the state of North Dakota. And for Mother's Day, he was planning to surprise his mom, so he was driving back on Mother's Day weekend when tragically his car flipped and he was killed. The story has it that Delilah was so despondent that she could not eat or sleep or speak for weeks. And the only thing that her husband, Art, knew to do is to drive her out into the forest in Upper Michigan, where they would pick wild blueberries and asparagus. And she sat on a downed log, and the following poem came to her. Oh, how I love to walk out in the woods. In its calm and still beauty, I've long understood. As I look at the wonders our Creator has made, all the hustle and bustle of this world seems to fade. Down in the meadow, you hear the call of a lark, while high on the hill some deer feed on bark. There are wintergreen berries and wild onion shoots, an abundance of flowers and trailing green roots. Now, if you go in the forest with the world, you're off key, and you're quiet and still, and you sit and you see. Here you know of God's love, and you know by God's grace of all worldly issues you're able to face. And this was written by my grandmother, Delilah, who spent most of her life gardening and reciting that poem to my brothers and I. And over time, I began to realize the intergenerational touchstone that this poem represented in terms of the healing and therapeutic power of being outside. Tonight, we will talk briefly about some of the different ways that that scientific studies have shown how nature can be a benefit to us and to our health. And then we'll talk about a concept that I'm really curious and interested about, which is that of reciprocity, and how can we cultivate a mindset and in our actions and behaviors to also be a benefit to the earth. We will spend some time taking a look at the nonprofit that I helped found and just showing you from the inside what that is like from the vantage point of the participants. And then we'll, at the end, talk about what we can do to try and bring nature back, or more into our lives if it's not already. So, do people here have a favorite type of nature? Sometimes people gravitate towards certain elements in nature, certain types. Is there something that draws you in and captivates your attention? And if there is, have you ever wondered why that particular kind of nature does? When was your last time in nature where you were mindful that you were in nature, that you were experiencing some kind of pleasant sensation or thought or emotion because you were in nature? We know that increasing attention has focused on this relationship between human health and nature contact, and that spending time in the outdoors in green and blue, and lots of colorful spaces, how this can be helpful across a whole host of different health domains spanning mental, cognitive, emotional, physical, biological, physiological, social, community. One of the first studies ever conducted to look at the role of nature was conducted by someone with the last name of Ulrich, and they looked at the medical records of gallbladder patients where they basically they controlled for all the demographic variables you can imagine, and half of the patients had a hospital room that faced a courtyard with trees that were in bloom and they had leaves on them, and the other half of the patients faced a brick wall. And what they found was that the patients that had the nature view had significantly less use of pain medications, significantly shorter hospital stays, significantly less complaints to the nursing staff. And this study has been repeated many different times with other things besides seeing nature. It's hearing sounds of nature like bird song or nature sounds, smelling nature with aromatherapy, having tactile experiences with things brought in, and the same kinds of results are shown. Another study with thyroidectomy patients found that those who had flowers or plants in their rooms also had very similar outcomes. Less pain medication use, less hospital stay, improved mood during the time. We know from large studies that people report having better quality of life and better health when they live in nearby nature. And that they even report greater satisfaction with their job and with just life in general. There are some interesting studies out of Japan that have studied something called forest bathing, where people experience multiple days immersed in nature and they're guided through a very mindful, multi-sensory experience of smelling and touching and listening to and being with their surroundings. And some of these studies have shown really interesting findings biologically to show that natural killer cells have increased significantly during this time, as well as the release of anti-cancer proteins, and that these findings have stayed for up to a month after their exposure. We know from some researchers in Colorado that just camping for a week can reset our chronobiological clock and our circadian rhythm and get us back to a natural light-wake cycle. There was a longitudinal study with about 1,500 people that tried to discern what was happening during a group nature walk. And they saw that those who took place in the nature walks versus non-nature walks showed significantly less stress, And they controlled for things like social support and physical activity, and they still saw these benefits. And then there was another very large study out of the University of Exeter that looked at about 20,000 people and how much time they spent in nature and what they talked about in terms of their quality of life and their stress. And they said that if you spent about 120 minutes or 2 hours a week in green and blue spaces, not less than, and not necessarily more than, but that was around the sweet spot of time for you to show these kinds of benefits of being good for mental health and well-being. And like I said, 2 hours was kind of a hard boundary. It's not to say that doing it more isn't going to be great, but if you're looking for what's the minimum amount that they say I'm supposed to do, this is kind of the guiding number. One thing that I find just awesome is that people who have positive experiences, positive emotions, when they're outside in nature, that there's growing literature that they also have accompanying positive attitudes about taking care of the earth, that they engage in earth care behaviors, and they might vote differently, they might pick up litter when they're on a walk, they might recycle more or eat less red meat or do lots of different things. And they're showing that when people have positive emotions like gratitude, joy, compassion, awe, when they're in nature, those are called self-transcendent emotions, that they tend to see those kinds of responses. So why do we think that spending time in nature is good for us? There are a few theories that I'm not going to go too deeply into tonight. One theory called biophilia is that it's just baked into our DNA. From our history as Homo sapiens, where we've spent the majority of our time here in nature, only the most recent period of our evolutionary history have we been really removed from nature, that because of our deep connection to the natural world, it's just baked in. Another theory says that due to this biophilia, that whenever we're exposed to safe, meaningful, positive, natural environments, it affects us at the physical level first. They talk about a bottom-up response. So when we are in a fight or flight response, that's called a sympathetic nervous system response, when our adrenaline gets going. The opposite of that is a parasympathetic nervous response, and that's called the rest and digest response. And another theory says that being in nature facilitates that rest and digest response. And then the last theory doesn't focus as much on the body, it focuses more on the mind, and it's called attention restoration theory. And that is based on the fact that we live a noisy life, and it's incredibly cognitively fatiguing for us with all of the cognitive demands, especially nowadays, let alone in '89 when this theory came out. Just imagine all that's changed with our attention since 1989. And that the theory is that nature helps us engage in a soft fascination, and it shifts our focus away from the busyness of our minds and more into a calmer place, and then that has top-down effects into helping our bodies. When we think about different levels of nature connectedness, we know that spending time, even in unspectacular nature, is still good for us. So it doesn't just have to be where you all live for it to be good for us. And that even nature found in urban environments can be good. We do know, though, that some studies have shown that in the wild nature does show more health benefits than urban nature, and that urban nature shows more health benefits than the more artificial spaces. And that we know that all of that is nullified if the nature experience does not feel safe or if it feels threatening. So you have to have it being positive, safe, and meaningful for those benefits to happen. As a mindfulness teacher myself, I'm often reminded how amazing of a mindfulness teacher nature itself can be. When we take our headphones off, when we stop and pause and take a breath in and notice the bird song, or notice the way the treetops are swaying in the breeze, or whatever it is that we're allowing ourselves to notice, we can be overcome with the same kinds of cognitive and emotional experiences that you would if you were doing a meditation retreat. We also know that nature may be the world's greatest awe machine. Some of you may know about this concept of awe when something so vast and difficult for our brains to comprehend is presented to us, especially if it's a positive thing and not something scary, that we have no room to accommodate it, and so it's just mesmerizing, and we're taken by it. Think of northern lights, or there are lots of things actually that can elicit awe. And we know that awe can lead to not only a sense of wonder, but a shift in perspective. It can turn down the parts of our brain that is connected to ruminating and to that fight or flight response. And it can also lead to greater connection and compassion and stewardship. We often will talk about nature as healer or nature as medicine, which is absolutely true. But sometimes we lose sight that nature is also patient. And when we think about all the things that we have done to Mother Nature in the course of our lives even, that we have to also keep that in mind when we celebrate and revere the healing potential of nature. In fact, when we just look at nature as a medical service provider that can benefit us, we kind of lose the big picture. And it's normal to want to know what the optimal dose is or how much do I need. But framing it in this way really is just about half the story. It's really not that different to what we've done to things like yoga and meditation, which are also more lifestyle practices than just a health fix. This mentality is in contradiction with more traditional wisdom, where nature had been seen as an extension of ourselves, of our bodies, of our minds, and our ethics that were interconnected with it. And that throughout millennia, ancient societies left signs and artifacts that highlighted this vast interdependence on the natural world, where they relied on it for health and healing, for safety, for sustainability, and spirituality. Practitioners of traditional Chinese medicine and Buddhism in certain indigenous communities, they often ask the question, where does the person end and nature begin? Is it at the skin that comes in contact with the air? Or is it before this, where oxygen meets and is received by the lungs? Is the health of our lungs any different or separate than the health in the air? Since our body and our planet are both primarily comprised of water, is the health of one body of water really separate or different from another body of water? Dr. Nicole Redvers, a Canadian neuropathic doctor and member of the Dene-Nuqua First Nation, she reminds us that we turn over our cells about every 3 months as humans, and that if we get our drinking water, say from the Bow River, then are we not an embodiment of the Bow River, and are people not embodiments of the rivers and streams by which they live? So if there really isn't any separation, if we really are extensions of this natural world, then are we not then just by talking about people and planet, are we creating a similar kind of a split that we've done really well with mind and body? There's an Australian environmental philosopher, Glenn Albrecht, and he coined the term the symbiocene. And it is described as being the Earth's next evolutionary period, following our current anthropocentric, sorry, I have a hard time pronouncing it the way he does, anthropocentric period. And in this period, it is hypothesized that people will try to live more interdependently and interconnectedly with nature in companionship. So one of the questions I keep asking myself and in the research is maybe if we could actually see ourselves as part of nature and not separate from it, we might behave in less destructive ways. If we could view green behaviors no differently than other health behaviors, like getting enough sleep and movement and vegetables and water, maybe that could be another part of the solution that we desperately need. I've done some thinking and writing on this notion of reciprocity, of returning the favor back to Mother Earth. And one of the ideas that our lab is exploring is, what if when we are counseling patients about spending time in nature and writing them a prescription to do that, what if we use that as an opportunity to also talk about ways in which they might be able to be kinder to the earth in different ways? We're not talking about, moving the tectonic plates. We're talking about turning off the lights. We're talking about walking somewhere if it's safe and you can. Maybe eating one less red meat meal a week if possible, or bringing a cloth grocery bag or other bag to the grocery store. So we are currently doing some research in cancer survivor populations where they not only get a prescription to spend time in nature, but they get an earth care prescription. And we're exploring how the two things might go hand in hand. I'm going to shift now to sharing some of the stories of the nonprofit that I helped found and that has been happening since around 2008. Cancer sucks at any age. We'll just start with that. When you are a young adult in your 20s and 30s, it's a time period that has more developmental milestones probably since gestation. And when young adults get diagnosed with cancer at this age, when the lightning bolt of cancer strikes, the power can go off in their lives, leaving them in the dark. And it can be incredibly disconnecting for young adults, disconnecting from friendships they had, from future plans they thought they would have, for many from their fertility, from feeling safe, from finishing their schooling, feeling good about their bodies, feeling independent, financial freedom, possibly finding a partner. And we call this the adverse effect of disconnect. And so it can leave many young adults feeling lost in transition after this happens. So in 2008, we started a nonprofit called True North Treks, where we help teens and young adults and their caregivers find direction through connection. And True North, if you're not familiar with the history of the term, unlike grid or magnetic north, True North is marked in the skies by the North Star. It's been used by seafarers and explorers since the beginning of time to find direction and just not navigate on random chance. We help young adults connect with nature after something as unnatural as cancer at this time. We help them connect with their peers who've walked a similar path and get it. And we help them connect with themselves through mindful awareness practices like yoga and mindfulness meditation. So we call these our three crucial connections: connecting to nature, connecting to peers, and connecting to oneself. And these kinds of connections aren't always readily available in modern cancer treatment centers. But through programs like integrative oncology and psychosocial support, our goal is to try and help that become as commonplace as those. At True North Treks, we offer free, week-long backcountry backpacking and canoeing treks in places like Wyoming and Utah. We also, in 2018, because we would hear from cancer survivors, boy, I would love to go on one of these, but I can't take off work for a week. Or others would say, I love nature, I would love to be with my peers, but I don't want to go to the bathroom outside all week. I don't want to shower. And we were lucky to be gifted an incredibly beautiful retreat center in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan on Lake Superior. It was designed by the architect Frank Lloyd Wright's last apprentice, and it has an incredible organic architectural feel so that every room you're in feels like an extension out into the natural surroundings. There we make our own maple syrup. We have a beautiful organic garden where we teach food as medicine to the participants and engage them in helping to prepare some of their meals. We offer our treks for survivors only, so a bunch of strangers coming together for an experience. We also offer treks for survivors and their caregivers, and that can be anybody who has been there for them. Sometimes it's a spouse or a partner, sometimes it's a sibling, sometimes it's a best friend. We have treks for who we call next level survivors. These are young adults who've aged out of our 18 to 39 age range, and they're maybe in their 40s. We also have offered treks in Spanish to matinee survivors. I think right before COVID, we finished filming a 50-minute documentary film that's titled To the Stranger Who Has Loved You. And I encourage any of you to check it out. It's freely available on our website. Maybe your cancer center would want to screen it here. It's 50 minutes, and it just helps you step into the hiking boots or get into the canoes of some of the young adult survivors who chose to go on one of these treks and to see some of the things that happen. I have just a couple clips from the documentary that I would love to share.
Do you remember when we did the silent hike?
Yeah.
And we talked about the forest? We talked about how something like a forest fire can come through and destroy everything. And yet...
This is just what it looks like right now.
Yeah. Something new will always grow back.
Yeah. Because it has a really nutrient-rich soil now, and that's really when it hit me again. Those processes refining me, I guess. And there's still something more beautiful to come.
Yeah.
I noticed water reflecting light onto the side of the canyon wall.
I noticed that spark in me light up again when cooking outdoors. I hadn't done that in a long time.
I noticed the quiet, how quiet it was, and that was different.
I noticed a lot of selflessness among everyone here. I've been really discouraged lately by selfish people in my life, so it's refreshing to see everyone lending a helping hand.
I observed all these little yellow butterflies on the way here. I have a butterfly tattoo on my chest, and that was part of my mastectomy tattoo. And so after my grandfather died 4 years ago, right before I was diagnosed, me and my mom would always see butterflies come, and they would stay longer than they probably should, and they would land usually on one of us. And so we always said, that's Papa coming to visit. That's Papa coming to visit. And so today, seeing all those butterflies, it was like, well, Papa's here. Just see this. It makes you feel so big yet so small.
And to be able to come out here and reset yourself
and find who you are, because you're not the same as you were before.
No.
You're alone.
You are. It completely changes you in every molecule and atom of your body. It completely changes you.
Yeah.
I've never felt more connected with a group of strangers that can be openly talking about my poop. about my scars, and honestly, like, I had talked to people about the guy who broke my heart when he found out I had my mastectomy. Like, I had never been able to talk to people about that. People would ask me about it, and I would make something up.
So our organization, we're proud that we've been recognized as a top young adult cancer support organization. Over the last, 6 years or so now, we've really tried to help our participants that don't have good access to programs like ours get access. We call this our CB Free initiative. That when you can see yourself, you can be yourself, and when you can be yourself, you can free yourself. And so we haven't done a great job, and I was going to say it's probably a very similar job to most organizations like ours, where it's mostly white women with breast cancer who are signing up, and there are lots of other cancer types, and men do as well. But we might have every season 15% of our participants who represent traditional communities of color or underserved minority groups, minoritized groups that don't have great access to these programs. And so through our CB Free initiative, we're working hard to try and change that. We made a short documentary film following the life of one of our participants, Julianne Villa, who was an endurance athlete. She rode 100-mile bike rides and done over 25 marathons, and then through her 3 different cancers became disabled, and they took her pelvis out and she shares the life of living at the intersection between being a cancer survivor and a person living with a physical disability. We also have at our retreat center been working on renovating it to be more accessible. The home that I showed you is highly inaccessible, and there's not a lot we can do. But there's an adjacent art studio that we're converting right now into a second facility that is ADA compliant, Americans with Disabilities compliant. What time is it? Just want to know. I have a 3-minute video that just shows one of our seasons that I'd like to show if I could.
Challenge what the future holds. Try and keep your head up to the sky. Lovers, they may cause you tears. Go ahead, release your fears. Stand up and be counted. Don't be ashamed to cry. You gotta be better, you gotta be bold, you gotta be wiser. You gotta be hard, you gotta be tough, you gotta be stronger. You gotta be cool, you gotta be calm, you gotta stay together. All I know, love will save the day. Hear what your mother said, read the books your father read. Try and solve the puzzles in your own sweet time. Some may have more cash than you, others take a different view. My, oh my, hey, hey, hey. You gotta be better, you gotta be bold, be wiser. You gotta be hard, you gotta be tough, be stronger. You gotta be cool, you gotta be calm, and stay together. All I know, love will save the day. Life has no questions, goes on without you. Leaving you behind if you can stand a pace. The world keeps on spinning, can't stop if you try to. It's not dangerous. to listen as your tale unfolds. Challenge what the future holds. Try and keep your head up to the sky. Lovers, they may cause you tears. Go ahead, release your fears. My, oh my, hey, hey, hey. You gotta be bad, you gotta be bold, be wiser. You gotta be hard, you gotta be tough, be stronger. You gotta be cool, you gotta be calm, stay together. All I know, love will save the day. You gotta be bad, you gotta be bold, and be wiser. You gotta be hard, you gotta be tough, be stronger.
So I'd like to just talk a little bit about this afternoon. I shared some research findings that we've collected data from participants' experience, and I'll share that paper with you at the end. But I wanted to share instead some of the things that we think are happening or that our treks facilitate to lead to some of those findings. There are lots of different amazing nature-based cancer support organizations out there. And sometimes, and we try to help people understand what it is we do and what we don't do. We don't explicitly bill ourselves as an adventure or wilderness therapy organization. For some people, it might feel like an adventure, and it might feel therapeutic, but that is not what we're doing out there on purpose. We don't have any desire to purposefully increase people's adrenaline or risk or challenge. Now, for some people, that might happen based on what we're doing, but it's really just because of where we are. And then it's also not intended to be a recreational, drinking beer, throwing corn, the game cornhole or whatever, and just, of course, people have fun, but that's also how we try to help people know what we're doing. We see nature, we work with nature as a holding environment for our three connections to manifest. It can lead to lots of different kinds of physical activity. When we're out on our backpacking or canoeing or kayaking trips, people are constantly in motion, and for periods of time, during most days, and that can then nicely lead to periods of rest and unprogrammed time, where people get to just take a break and not do anything necessarily. Our treks facilitate a great sense of belonging with people that they have been separate from until they come on the trek. Many young adults talk about not knowing any other young adults affected in the same ways, and so this is a chance for them to find and be found. This leads to feelings of community and interdependence, and all of this can lead to something that we call co-regulation, where we're beginning to become in sync with each other's, not only just with each other's breath, but with each other's beings. Our treks can help people feel agency and efficacy. When you put up a tent for the first time, when you cook something, when you teach someone how to tie a knot. As you saw in our curriculum, we do a lot of mindful movement. And so we, at our retreat center, actually have a yoga studio in the woods. It was the previous owner's garage for his Porsche that we converted into a yoga studio. But other than that, nature is our yoga studio. And every chance we get, we try to find really cool and beautiful places to move and to stretch. We also do the same with periods of mindful reflection. On most of our treks, participants they find a sit spot and they sit by themselves for reflection and contemplation. There are lots of periods of quiet. We don't let people bring radios or play music. We love music. We think music is amazing, but on our treks, again, because we're trying to facilitate this kind of an environment, we listen to the music of the river or the woods. This leads to values of patience, of interconnectedness, of growth and working through sometimes difficult things. It leads to moments of clarity, shedding, literally, letting go and letting be. And then we talked earlier about just moments of awe and cosmic insignificance when we're met by these beautiful, vast things in the natural world, making us experience wonder and impermanence, knowing that that river is never the same. And then, of course, there's a lot of play where we don't take ourselves too seriously, and we try to really just have a good time with each other. So these are some of the essential conditions and qualities that we feel like really lead to the kinds of connection and growth and belonging and transformation that we see in our participants. And we know that when people feel safe, warm, dry, connected, and can eat some healthy food that and get a somewhat comfortable night's sleep, that just about anything is possible. The paper that we published on the biological and psychological outcomes is publicly available. You can find it online, and essentially we saw significant decreases in inflammatory markers. There's one called interleukin-6 that tends to get high with things like stress and depression. And we saw it decrease significantly over the course of our treks. We saw self-reported symptoms of depression and anxiety and sleep disturbance go significantly lower over the course of our treks. This was not a randomized controlled trial. It was a pre-post program evaluation. So always take that into account, but it's kind of findings you like to see go in that direction. I'm just going to read a couple quotes from people because I feel like this is really where it's at. This experience reminded me that nature calms me and helps me see things in such a real, raw manner. I relearned how much I love connecting with the outdoors. Even dirty and smelly, there was something so pure and peaceful and quiet about the river. The sights and sounds and smells of nature very much drew me into the moment. It brought back happy memories from my childhood, playing in the woods. It felt good to think about the timelessness of the the sound, the ground, the trees, and the water. It was the first time in 10 years I let myself be vulnerable and fully accept the process this strange gift of cancer has been. This experience was without exaggeration, life-changing. I hiked in the woods of Montana, feeling ravaged by the physical and emotional toll of cancer, and left feeling renewed, strong, brave, proud, and at peace. These kinds of quotes happen after every trek. And while we think what we're doing is special, we also know it's not just what we're doing. It's what they're doing out in these incredible places. So if you want to check out True North Treks, is easily findable online. After sharing all that we and others do to bring people into nature, you might ask, what if I can't spend a week out in the wilderness? I might not be able to do that. And I published a kind of a popular piece in the Huffington Post's online magazine called Thrive Global called How to Embrace Nature in Your Own Backyard. And I wrote, every night before bed, my dog Goldie and I step outside into our front yard. Goldie has to go to the bathroom every night. And I turn off the porch light so we can stand quietly in the darkness under the stars. Sometimes we lie in the grass together and just breathe. I could be anywhere in this moment, but I'm just in my front yard, and this brings me peace. The health benefits are just an added bonus to this. So these are just a few small ways that we can try to invite more nature into our lives. If you're not yet familiar with the kind of nature that you like, maybe see if you can give that some thought. Make small moments outdoors a part of your routine. If it's possible to walk through an area, or even if you're going to be at the hospital. I just saw some incredible nature places in the cancer center today in the courtyards. Make sure to adapt the kind of nature you're into, the energy level that you have. Some days it might be going for a walk, some days it might just be sitting on your porch and opening a window. Look for nearby nature opportunities. I don't imagine that as hard to do here in Calgary, from what I've seen. In the Chicago area, there are plenty of places that don't have really great nearby nature. And so you have to think creatively for folks living in situations like that. And then invite another being to join you, whether it's a person or a pet, to spend some time. So just a few acorns to take with and plant, just to know that there are multiple health benefits to being outside. About 120 minutes is the magic number. Really didn't talk too much today about some of the health inequities of nature contact, but just know that not all green space is created equally, and we need to do a better job with our community design and built environment to make sure that it is. And that being in our backyard is good enough. You don't have to, again, go to Banff, even though it's probably not that hard for you all to do that. But me in Chicago, that would be a trip. So being in the backyard is just fine. So thank you all for being here. And I guess one thing before we ended, since I have your attention, that beautiful retreat center that you saw, that's actually the grand prize, winning a week there with any friends you want to bring, simply by stepping with our organization this July and August. It doesn't cost any money to join. You don't have to fundraise. All you have to do is download our free step app and walk with us in July and in August. And every 150,000 steps you step in that 2-month period, which isn't that hard to do, every person you refer, and then if you wanted to, every dollar you fundraise gets you entered to win that grand prize of that retreat center. So I invite you to join our health raiser this summer, and maybe you could win a week at Walt. It's open for Canadians. Well, why wouldn't you? All right, thank you.
All right, we'll do a little Q&A session. And I'm going to start it off, but think of your questions and we'll get this flowing. And I guess my first question to you is, are you in favor of the idea, the concept of nature prescriptions?
I am a big fan of nature prescriptions. That is a big focus of the research work that we're doing at Northwestern. While programs like True North Treks and the others that will take people out into beautiful nature for extended periods should continue to happen, people should continue to help support those, they're not a very scalable model. Not everyone can do it, and not regularly. So what's great about nature prescriptions is it meets people where they are, and it helps them figure out what kind of nature works for them best, whether that's a nearby park or sitting on, in a hammock in your backyard. And that is scalable. That is more in line with the public health framework. And so we're actively working to see if our hospital can start to train more people to prescribe nature, because it's not just as easy as telling people to go outside more. It's not helpful to be told to go outside more if you don't live in a safe area or if you don't live in an area with nearby nature. So it involves a conversation. It involves learning about what kind of nature is enjoyed by that person, where it feels safe, what's accessible, and trying to help figure out a prescription for what works best for that person.
I guess there would have to be some negotiation involved too. Like, I take prescriptions for blood pressure, and I know that I have to take that every day or else bad things will happen.
Yeah.
With a nature prescription, the patient kind of has to buy into it a lot more than, let's say, a pill, right?
The whole idea of social prescribing, and it's not a new idea. We've done it for exercise and for diet and for other health behaviors. It's based on this philosophy that when a trusted health authority, in some ways, even though we try to not make it that kind of a dynamic, but we do have a trust in our healthcare professionals. when they are recommending that when they prescribe something for us, it's at another level of seriousness than just saying, hey, you should try this. And sometimes for people, that structure of knowing, like, okay, this is 3 times a week for half an hour each time, it just helps it become more of a regular, serious thing that they'll incorporate to their life.
And I just want to say before I go to the audience for a question that I'm really glad to see what you're doing with young adults. I was on a committee, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, and there was a married couple on that committee who were, I think, 32, 33 years old. One had brain cancer, the other, I cannot recall what kind of cancer she had, but they both had serious cancers. And some of the issues they dealt with were heartbreaking. They wanted to have children, but they did not know if they would live long enough to raise the child. And just to hear that kind of thing, like I said, it's very heartbreaking. So thank you for what you do for the young adults. It's really remarkable. Any questions up in the audience?
Run around with the mic.
Oh.
Yep.
Don't be shy. Anyone come through?
Hi, thanks very much for the talk. I'm a palliative care physician, and many of the patients I work with in the last few months of their life, they can't get out of bed. They might be in the cancer center on the 9th floor. You can't open the window, and they tell us that they value being outdoors. And we did have a group that wanted to bring virtual reality onto our unit. And I was wondering if there's any research, like how do you know what it is about nature that's actually helping, and could you have something, artificial like that actually do the same thing for people?
Yeah, we were talking this afternoon about, I have a preference for actual reality versus virtual reality, but when it's not possible, the technology is really finally there for it to be an immersive, very realistic, scary and like, I can't believe technology can do this way. And there are some groups that are doing it, and it's actually not that expensive to get the VR camera and to bring it out into nature environments, and it, films it in a 360 kind of way, and then to upload that into different kinds of software. You could technically do one for this area if you wanted it to be personal. Yeah, it's not probably that different than these early studies of having a window view, sounds, smells, tactile, different ways to engage our senses. And I would say especially for people who can't get outside, who can't even get to the window based on being deconditioned to the extent that they are, that seems like an amazing use of technology for that purpose. I don't know about any real research trials.
So we did a study. With virtual reality. It was guided mindfulness using virtual reality, and so they listened to sort of instructions around, paying attention, and all the visuals were nature scenes that related to kind of the audio, and we were looking at it for managing pain in people with cancer, and people did, from the time they started the virtual reality to the time they finished it, their pain levels went down each day, and they did it for 6 weeks, and after the whole 6-week period, their pain had just decreased, and their anxiety had decreased, and things like that as well.
Yeah.
And honestly, the technology, and I know it was a couple of years ago, was not as good as it is now. Now it's hyper-realistic.
Yeah.
Okay, other question?
Let me just jump in with a quick question. Yeah. When somebody engages in forest bathing, or somebody engages in a wilderness trek or something like that, a lot of people have fear of the wilderness. Does that reduce the effectiveness of the exercise?
Yeah, I would say it depends. We talked about earlier how nature has to be appraised as being safe, non-threatening, non-dangerous. That doesn't always mean, though, that people will be surprised or experience a momentary fear. I've noticed, because on our treks we operate sometimes in grizzly bear country, we've seen rattlesnakes, and we've had different wildlife come in, and in the mountains there's a whole lightning protocol that we engage in if there's a lightning storm. I've seen that definitely doesn't derail someone's experience if they're having a positive experience. The one time a survivor told me, she said, after knowing that we're in grizzly bear country and knowing that if I don't practice good grizzly bear hygiene, right, if I don't do a pocket dump into the fire every night, we do a pocket dump. We make sure people check for taffy wrappers and candy and get that out of your pocket. We make sure we sleep 100 yards from where we eat, and that's 100 yards from where we cook. But they said, even after all of those things that we do, I know that a bear still could come in and grab me from my tent. And she said, it's kind of like cancer. I can try my hardest to do all these things I know I'm supposed to do that are going to be good for my health, but still at any point cancer can still say, I'm coming, And so for that person, it was, she kind of reframed that fear into this insight about what the bear represented. We have had people who've never slept a night in their life out of their bed from the Bronx or places where nature has not been something they did with their families. And so there can be a gentle onboarding with them. We don't, and that's again why we meet people where they are. We walk as slow as the slowest person. If people ask what time it is, we kind of say right now. And so we try not to push it in any way, shape, or form to help people ease into it.
I thank you very much. I guess the question you just answered is in relationship to the one I was going to ask, because I have that sense of being out in nature with a high level of hypervigilance and hyperarousal. And so my question was, how do you get someone who is in that state to gain the benefits and that you're looking for? So I think part you have.
I talked a lot today about the health benefits of nature. There are health benefits to mindfulness too, to meditation. I would say that the way we engage nature connection is exactly the same that we would engage mindfulness practice. I don't practice mindfulness for my health. It's great that it's good for my health, but I practice mindfulness so I can be here right now in this moment and not waste a second of my life if I can be here. When we bring people into nature, we don't sell it as a health benefiting trip. We sell it as an opportunity for them to connect with peers and with themselves. I don't think that the connection they experience, even in a hypervigilant and maybe at times fearful state because of where they might be, I still feel like being in the power of that group environment can supersede some of those other concerns. So maybe if we were able to look at whether or not their health got better versus they felt more connected and more understood and like they belonged, I still feel like we would see those, and we do see those things.
And so what about people who are really anxious to go into nature to begin with?
Yeah. We work with them, and we also let people know that maybe now or this might not be the right thing for you and the right time for you. But if you're willing to give it a try, we're willing to help you in any way we can. We have there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes on our treks, where all of our treks are staffed by 2 wilderness guides who have what's called a wilderness first responder credential, or higher. Sometimes we have nurses, we have EMTs, but a wilderness first responder can take care of any immediate danger that if anything were to go south, if someone were to sprain an ankle or fall or get sick. And we have a whole medical evacuation protocol in place where the local forest department knows where we are. We have a phone tree, we have satellite phones. We let people know what our protocols are because safety is the first and foremost thing that we do. And knock on wood, to date, we have not had an incident where anybody has gotten in any of those situations. The other guide is a mindfulness yoga trained guide. And that person is generally a mental health person. Just kind of goes with the territory of teaching mindfulness and yoga. So it's either a social worker, a psychologist, or a counselor. We advise them in their training that they need to check their credentials at the door. That this population of young adults has had their heads shrunk plenty from being in the medical system. And for many people in good ways. I say that kind of tongue in cheek. The psychosocial support provided by hospital systems like this is hugely helpful. We've also heard from many that they're not interested in another support group. And so we have listened, and we ask our mental health trained guides to just be the cool and awesome and supportive people that they are. But you can't hide that third eye if you're trained in that way. And so they're constantly seeing who might be not doing so well. And we have a philosophy of calling people in versus calling them out. So instead of saying, hey, across from a fire, what's going on? You okay? We might say instead, hey, can you help me carry some water jugs down to the canoe? And they do. And on that walk to the canoe, we might say, hey,